Hey folks, I wanted to address something that came up a little bit in last week's discussion board. In response to Hal Bennett's discussion of creativity and writing from the heart, um, some of you have asked, in which Bennett points out that from the first chapter of John, where John says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Um, Now, in Latter-day Saint theology, we point to the Word as being the Son, and in this essay, Bennett points to the idea that the Word, he takes it back to the Greek translation here. In the beginning was the Logos. Word as we have it, as it's been translated, comes from the Greek word Logos, which specifically refers to the discourse or speech or the divine interjection. It's always pointing to the spoken word. So we could read that as, in the beginning was the spoken word, was the discourse, was the dialogue, this discussion going on in the beginning. And so it's one of you asked, a student in the class asked what that actually meant. What is the Logos? What does that even mean? And so I kind of wanted to address that in terms of what is written in John, and also what is talked about in Bennett's essay, and some of the other things that were brought up in conjunction with his interpretation or his reading of John chapter 1. First of all, he uses a different translation. This is not how it appears in the King James Version, which is just fine. Other translations, I read frequently from different translations of the Bible and look at all of them in conjunction with the King James Version to kind of gain a fuller understanding of what's going on in the narrative. And I think this reading is particularly fruitful, this translation. When all things began, the Word already was. So that points to the idea that the Word came first, that this discourse, this spoken word, came before things began or things were created in this way. The Word dwelt with God, and what God was, the Word was. So if we look at the Word, this language, this divine interjection, one of Christ's names is actually the Word of God. So God speaks something and Christ carries that act out. He is the divine interjection. He is the mode of Christ, or the mode of the Father's speech. He is the way that the Father communicates with us. He comes between us and the Father, just like language comes between one person and another when they're communicating. And so it's impingent upon us. It's important that we learn to interpret the Word, that we learn to interpret Christ and His presence in our lives. And one way that we do this, obviously, is through the Word, through language, through the Word of God, through the Scriptures, and also through other discourse, other means of writing. We can use language as a way to point us to God and to think differently about Him. Because what God was, the Word was. God is a languaged being. He uses words to accomplish His work. I talk about that in this week's On the Mormon of Vision language screencast, where I talk about it in terms of Moses chapter 1, where God's works are without end and also His words are without end. God's works are brought to pass via His words. God speaks something and it comes into existence. In my very first screencast of the semester, I point to the Lectures on Faith, where it says, as approved by Joseph Smith, or at least the Lectures on Faith weren't written by Joseph Smith, but they were reviewed by him and approved by him. But anyway, it says that when a man works by faith, he works by mental exertion more than by physical force. It is by words with which every being works when he works by word, or when he works by faith. So words are central to our faith, that we use words to act upon the world, to bring things to pass, that there is great creative power in words. And that's kind of what this is pointing to in John, that the Word, the creative expression of the Father, is the Son, that he speaks. We have in Genesis, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So He's speaking things into existence. quite literally, that God uses language. He has a mouth. He speaks. And so that's one thing I think that Bennett is kind of riffing off of here in terms of John chapter 1, is that the Word is primal. It comes before everything else. Language is actually central to our existence, even as human beings. That is one thing that makes us human, is our ability to make language. That language makes connections in the brain. It helps connect us with other people. And that's one thing, again, that Bennett points to here, where he says that spark of recognition and connectedness that we experience when we're really on, when we're really writing well, it isn't an illusion. And this drive we feel to write something stunning and glorious isn't self-indulgent or addictive behavior. So it's not a bad thing, this drive to write, this drive to want to make language. Rather, what excites us is the recognition that our writing literally builds bridges between our own consciousness. Literally. Language, it makes the neurons fire in your brain. And it helps you to make connections between different ideas. When those neurons fire together, they wire together. When you have had this spark of insight when you're reading something, that's one thing that's happening, is that your neurons are making new connections. So it literally builds bridges between our own consciousness, in our own brains. It builds these neuronal bridges, these connections. And it also builds our own life, or between our own life experience and that of at least one other person. So it's not only a way of connecting things in our brain, of forging new ideas, but it's also a way of connecting and communing with other people. That's the way we reach out. And that's what the Logos is. So he continues, and beyond that, we've tapped into that little piece of the Logos, of the language, of this spoken discourse, this divine interjection, the creative expression that we each hold within us, this spark of the divine. Because the way that we use language is analogous to the way that God uses language. And so we have all of this within us. Now, there are probably religious leaders, he continues, who will tell me I'm crazy, or that I'm wrenching the text or treading on dangerous ground. But I don't think so. And neither do I, because of everything that I've talked about, that one thing that's central to Mormon theology is language, is the Word. One of Joseph Smith's greatest desires was to get back to a language that could allow him to connect more fully with God, and that would bridge that gap, or that would make the gap smaller between God and humans. And then Bennett continues, I believe there is a part of writing that's divine, that connects us with a greater authority than ourselves. And that certainly is something we're all born with. We're all born with the capacity to make language, to become gods, to be language makers, as God is a language maker. And so we just need to trust that. We need to trust that there is more going on with language than we think there is, as he points out here. And while Bennett likely didn't have the understanding of the restored gospel, I think that his reading of the first chapter of John points us to a fruitful way of considering language within the context of Mormonism, because it points to the idea that God, that Christ, is a languaged being. And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of answer that question, to spend a few minutes talking about the centrality of the Word, of the Logos, and what that meant, of addressing some of the concerns that came up in the discussion last week. Hopefully that's helpful. If you have questions about this, please do feel free, or of this or anything else in the class, feel free to let me know. And also I would commend to you my reading, or my discussions, my explorations of the Mormon vision of language each week, because I address these ideas in terms of LDS theology, and in ways, hopefully, that will expand your thinking about language and help us all to use language more responsibly. So anyway, my inbox is always open. Let me know if you have questions.